I don't mind at all.
I don't like listening to my voice, so you know.
You can use sign language and.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we're going to go over in a couple of minutes, stop is actually telling the child what to do, not what to do, what not to do, and it's not specific. So Ben, the mental switch here, which we're going to go over in very specific detail, is always being very specific about what you want them to do, not what you want them to avoid doing. So I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint that we use for the PDI portion, just like we did for the CDI. So just bear with me a second, please.
So just getting back to the grill analogy, that would be, rather than saying, don't stand too close to the grill, come stand over here where it's safe.
Exactly that.
That's a good image for me to keep in my head. Yeah, that's good.
Exactly that. Where am I going for? I'm going there.
It's basically like, I guess you can think about it as like avoiding the negative.
Avoiding the negative, yeah.
You know, like always just shifting toward the positive thing that he can do, right?
Yeah. Somebody woke up happy. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, the first thing she did when she opened her eyes was scream.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure. It's just no one even thing. I was like, burger, nah. Chicken, nah. Right, Tara? Butter sandwich, nah.
Everything is behaving. I'll respond to this up in just a sec. Okay. Okay.
Oh, goodness. Oh.
All right. So here's what we're doing. We're assuming you know that you both came within a hair's breadth of hitting these targets we have for CDI. And just FYI, those targets were set at such a high level that even if parents slide back a bit after we graduate them, they're still doing it at a level high enough to maintain desired behavior. So if all you did was maintain your good CDI skills where you had them, that would be great.
Yeah, I think we both roll it out a couple times a day, so situationally.
What we go for is not that you just roll it out a couple of times a day, but where that becomes kind of your default way of talking. That's kind of the asymptote that we're shooting for. All right. So what we're going for when we talk about giving instructions or commands, again, I'm going to use those interchangeably, is consistency, predictability, and follow through. It's like a new religion that you're going to be orthodox with, that there's a pro forma in the way you give instructions so that Sky is always prepared, never confused, and always know exactly what's going to come next. I was doing a coaching session with a family in Dubai this week, and the dad said, I didn't want to do a timeout, so I told him if he didn't follow my instructions, he was going to lose a tally on his point chart. I said, that confuses the hell out of a kid. We need one consequence that the kid knows is coming consistently, and they benefit from that consistency, that predictability, and that follow through. So I'll be emphasizing that as we do this together. We're aiming for, you can see my PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're aiming to be consistent and predictable 100% of the time. Definitely doing this in a calm, controlled manner. In fact, I'll say that if you feel your carotid bulging or you feel the tension in your voice, you've abandoned the script. This is a script like an actor that allows you to do it the same way each time. We expect as a result, kids learn to comply at a really, really high rate, and that they're eager to please, not in an arbitrary way, but in a mutually sort of satisfying way. And that the relationship is enhanced by it. Kids like the structure, but we're looking for a balance between high warmth and predictable, consistent limit setting. My analogy to the word sword before in that little animated video, did you hear when I said you don't want to draw the sword too often?
Yeah.
Here's the sword.
Oh, okay.
My Nerf sword. This is the sword that when you draw, because you've given an instruction, you're obligating yourself to follow through. So we want high warmth with the CDI foundation that you've been building to complement giving good instructions.
It's okay, it's all right. Just a little.
Again, you'll decide how much of this applies to you. This is sort of a pro forma teach. I don't know that he misbehaves 100 times a day, but we're looking to reduce non-compliance and increase compliance. And that's why we're doing this form of warmth-based compliance training. First step is to complete. If we were doing this per protocol, I would be coaching you to do it in sessions with me before rolling out to other times of the day. And I'm going to encourage you to do that. Let's do proof of concept that when you're doing it in a play situation, you're getting comfortable with the script. He's getting comfortable with the routine before you roll it out a couple of times a day, and then before you roll it out all day. And I'll walk you through what that multi-step rollout is. We would, if we were doing this pro forma, get to address how to stop behaviors that you don't have time for a warning, and that would come later, and we'll figure out together how that plays out. And as the line says on the bottom, we're going to be looking to teach how to give effective commands. And so we're now going to go through what are considered the 8 steps of effective commands. I'll send you the handout that summarizes this, send you the video, and we'll talk through it. But we've, I guess ironically, we've already hit on a couple of them. So these are the 8 rules, and the subsequent slides will take us through one at a time, being direct, positively stated, one at a time, etc. So direct commands tell the child that they're being told to do something and that it's not optional, we're not asking. And that was the distinction I was making before on my animated video between indirect commands and direct commands. Hey, buddy, could you stand over here for me? That's optional when you may not actually mean it to be optional. Can you help me pick up the toys? That may be meant to be optional and not a requirement. So it's through the specificity of the words that Sky will know whether he's being told to do something or asked to do something. Please sit down is different than will you sit down? Put this puzzle back in the bin is different than how about you help me put the puzzle back in the bin? Questions? Good to go?
Yeah, I mean, this is very in line with what Dr. Granlund was saying on that speech that we saw.
Oh, Temple Grandma.
Yeah, just don't ask questions, give instructions.
Right. The most common mistake that you will make, because you're in the same category as the rest of us, is the word okay with a question mark at the end.
Yeah.
You may not remember this, but I know my style. When I say to you in a session, tell Sky there's a minute left in special time, and then follow it up with a labeled praise. When you're transitioning to the other parent, whoever went first, I've always said to you, because I know my style, tell Sky special time is over now and avoid the word okay at the end. You're telling him, not asking him.
Yeah.
Now that's not a command, but it's a more unequivocal statement. Because if you're asking okay, you're inviting subtly or explicitly non-compliance. All right, so what would be more direct than would you throw this out away from me?
Please throw this out for me. Please throw this out, not for me. Please throw this.
Right, please throw this out. How about putting on your coat?
Would you put on your coat, please? Or
So that's polite, but it's still indirect.
do you want to say, put on your coat, please?
Exactly,
Or please put on your coat?
exactly. And instead of let's clean up now, okay?
Please clean up now.
And so that would be very, very direct. In a minute, we'll also get to another characteristic, which is to be more specific, but that's how you translate the indirects into direct. And you need to know that if you say it correctly, you're being no less polite. Please throw this away from me is just as polite as would you throw this away from me? Please put your coat on is just as polite as put your coat on or could you put your coat on?
Shirt. Is she drinking?
We're also, as the second part of an effective command, always telling the child what to do instead of what not to do. That was the point that we hit on a few minutes ago. And it just improves self-esteem as well by knowing you're doing the right thing. So instead of stop hitting Tara, it might be what? Not that he does that, but.
He's playing nicely with your sister. Okay.
So that would be
That's not
both
specific enough.
positively stated and direct. Instead of don't climb on that. You know that tire swing you have in the back? Instead of don't go on the tire swing, what would be both direct and positive?
Please jump up and down next to me.
Exactly. You're having to think in that nanosecond what it is you want him to do instead of what you want him to not do. And if he's playing really roughly with the toys, that's not how we play with our toys. What would be both direct and positively stated?
So what I've tried to do is like follow it up with something. So like, please play nicely with your toys. I love when you when you take such good care of your whatever it is.
And that's all exactly what we just said. It's both direct, please play nicely with your toys, and it's positively stated. And I like when you play gently with your toys is an added bonus because that's a labeled praise. The other thing we do is give commands one at a time, even though we may have knowledge that kids can handle multi-step directions. So developmentally, Sky could probably handle, please give this to mom and then put this on the table. But in terms of practice of following directions, we want to stick with one at a time so that we can immediately go to following through on the one instruction we gave and not have the ambiguity of what do we do if a kid complies with one part of what we do, but they don't comply with the other part of what we say.
I learned this by trial and error with the evening routine, because I'm the one who does the evening routine generally, is you have to do one task at a time. You know, we're gonna first the diaper, then the pajamas, and the teeth. If you lay it all out at the beginning, it does not go as well.
Like you said. Now, this one is narrowing down a little bit more to be specific about what the behavior is you want done. So I want to go back to a couple of the ones you said already. Please play gently with the toys may not be specific enough. Please only play with the right toys, not that you would say that wouldn't be specific enough. So we want to be clear exactly what the behavior is you want them to do. Please jump next to me is direct, specific, positively stated. So we always want the thing that they're being told to do to be observable as specific by somebody else. Behave is one of the more common ones. Watch out is common. Wait is common because they're direct, but they're not specific. And so we actually go through this rubric of teaching how to give effective commands. So far we've covered direct, positively stated, specific. What was the other one we did? One at a time. Okay. You want to be really, really clear. You want to be 150% confident that whatever you're telling Sky to do, he can do, because otherwise it's a no-win situation for him. So you want to make sure he knows what to do. If you say, I can't think of an example of anything you've told him to do in my presence that didn't fit this, but if you're going to follow through with a command, especially because you want to teach him to follow through every time, just be really clear he can do it. Can you think of any examples of this where you might be on the fence whether or not it's appropriate?
In terms of cognitive difficulty, probably not. He has a very
Or
good
physically.
he has a very good vocabulary, and we don't push him physically that much.
Yeah, I'm not anticipating this will be an
Yeah.
issue. When I'm coaching parents, sometimes they do, and I just remind them of this part of it. Super, super important that you aim for a calm, neutral tone and not escalate your negative tone when he's not complying, because then you would be inadvertently teaching him not to take you seriously until you raise your voice. I did a graduation session with a lovely family a couple of weeks ago. And in the graduation session, we often debrief with the family, say, what aspects of this were most helpful to you? And mom said, being encouraged to use a robotic tone when she's giving commands helped her a lot. And the consistency, predictability aspect, that's what she highlighted.
Robotic over warmth is okay.
So I didn't like the word robotic either. I asked her, what do you mean by that? And she said, just using kind of a neutral voice. I'm not giving away in my delivery that I'm actually pissed off at you for not doing it. So I'd rather you go for warm, firm. I call it recipe voice. You know, please come stand next to me. The fire is hot. Please stand over here. But staying with that calm, neutral tone throughout.
So I have a question about that. I definitely get angry sometimes. And those are situations I'd like to try to avoid. But in situations even where I'm not there yet, I have like a stock phrase that I use for Sky. And I say, and I don't change my tone of voice, but I say, I'm being serious now, Sky. And I use that to prepare him. And he actually tends to respond very well to that because he knows that if he doesn't, you know, then I might get upset. But I guess it sounds like ideally I wouldn't do that.
Right. It's functioning the same way as what we're doing, which is something should signal to him that an important instruction is coming.
Right, right.
I'm going to give you the functional equivalent of that in a minute.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
But what you're saying to him functions in a very, it serves an important function.
Yeah, and it doesn't rile him up. Then he kind of thinks it's funny. Generally, he's like, Mommy, you're about to be serious or something.
That's right. And essentially what you're doing is you're differentiating for him the difference between an indirect command and a direct command, i.e.
Yes, that's
one
true.
that you're going to follow through with and one that you're not.
Exactly.
And in a very subtle way, I would suggest you're also preparing yourself to stay calm and to follow.
Yeah. No, that's true. Just saying that helps me too, for sure.
Yeah, it serves a very interesting function.
Yeah.
Okay, explanations given before a command will help with compliance. It'll feel nicer. It sets them up for success. And I think as a hardcore playful behavior therapist, it actually gives the kid a signal that the command is coming. So if I say, I have some important information to you, which is the functional equivalent of Sky, I'm serious, it sets him up for success. It might be simple things like, it's time for my game, please sit next to me. It's time for my game is the explanation before the command. Or if you're sharing an activity and you want to meet and expand him with his fire theme, firefighter theme, it might be, I have an idea of something to add to our game, please da-da-da. And the I have an idea for something to add to the game is the explanation before the command. And I think in a very subtle way, it prepares him that a change is coming.
Yeah.
So we love explanations before commands.
No, but I think that is really important because he's a kid who has difficulty with transitions.
And a lot of
And I think, and I think having more preparation verbally really helps him.
Right. And this is all about setting kids up for success. It's not becoming automatons.
Right.
Be mindful that if you tell him to do something and then he protests or says why, and then you give the explanation, be mindful that you're inadvertently teaching him to dawdle or not follow your directions when you then give the explanation. So it's on us to give a good explanation beforehand.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And not to inadvertently reinforce it. Now, sometimes parents will realize, darn, I didn't give the explanation. And after the compliance, they'll say, great listening. The reason I wanted you to do it that way was because blah, 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 blah. You know, like, Sky, please stand here. He complies. And you say, thanks for listening. I want you to stand here because I could tell the fire was getting hotter or I saw some sparks that you couldn't see when you were bending down. So fitting in the explanation before or after is terrific.
Okay. I like that.
Especially during, I'm going to say all the time, not just especially during this early training phase. Only give commands that you really need to give as direct instructions. Otherwise, you can give it as information or as indirect commands, because when you give a direct command, you're pulling out the sword. So really want you to learn to be parsimonious and sparing with how many things you're telling them to do.
So can I ask you something? Sorry to interrupt. So yeah, I realized when I mentioned that comment about, you know, I'm being serious now, I think I don't actually give him a lot of commands, and generally my direct commands are following that. But I realize that I sometimes say, I need you to, that's an incorrect way to say it, right? Because it's not about me needing something. It's about him just doing something. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. And many folks don't intuitively hear the difference between I need you to and you need to, but we actually do code I need you to as an indirect command and you need to as a direct command.
Okay, thanks. That's cool.
All right. So why play commands? We start out getting the parents and the child comfortable with the pattern, the rhythm of the script of this in a play situation. So typically we would say, and I'll guide you, we're figuring out how to have this meet your needs rather than the typical weekly coaching thing. It might be you say to Sky, special time is so much fun, but dad and I also need, or mom and I also need to teach you how to follow directions really well. So after we do your game, we're going to practice listening and minding, which is like following directions. We start in a play situation to increase the likelihood that it'll be successful, rather than all of a sudden doing it outside with dangerous tools or something like that. Is your little one so cute that you're giving your attention to something other than my?
We're just
Am I being bested by a cute little kid? That's what I want to know.
This is how we live every moment of our lives. We have one child doing something, and we're trying not to.
We've gotten very good at using one ear and one eye, and the other ear and the other eye.
Very good.
Disconjugate gaze.
So as this slide says, our goal is not to teach Sky to be good at handing you blue Legos, but to be good at following directions. But one is a metaphor for the other. We're going to practice in a play situation. When you feel successful with that, I'm going to encourage you to roll it out to a couple of commands throughout the day. And again, we'll get into the specifics of this. Okay, so if you were in a play situation and you did the right introduction and said, we're going to practice following directions. I've enjoyed playing firefighter with you, but now it's time for my game, which is magnetize. Please come sit next to me. What are the different things that he could do, and what do you think he would do?
I think he would respond generally poorly.
Yeah.
Because his play is very rigid, right?
Okay.
So,
yep. And we're gonna meet and expand, because that was one of your goals. Now, respond poorly. Let's talk about that as behavior. What might I see, or what might you see?
You say, no, daddy,
I
no,
think
mommy.
there'd be a tensing of the body.
Yeah.
And some concern now that the good times are over. And
and he would hold on tight to his toy.
Yeah, hold on
whatever
tight.
It was.
You would definitely see like a rigid, like.
Yeah.
But at what point would it be non-compliance is the question. When, Erica, when you said, no, daddy, that's non-compliance.
Yeah.
Everything else is not yet non-compliance that you just described. And what I'm teaching you to do in this exercise is to learn to quickly define compliance, non-compliance, and we're going to have a flow chart that I'm going to take you down.
Yeah.
So you know what to do in the face of it.
I think he would say,
no, daddy would come first.
He would first say, no, daddy, we are not.
Yeah, he says it like that, like a robot.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a non-compliance. What else might he do?
Not. Yeah.
What else might he do?
Well, once he says, no, we are not, if you don't agree with him that we're not going to do it.
Yeah, what else does he do if you're not?
Well, he won't play Magnetiles at that point. You will have salted any chance of that game happening.
Well, I know, but then what does he do, right? Like physically, what does he do? I'm trying to think.
That's what I'm getting at also.
What does he do?
If he walked away, he walks away, that would be non-compliance.
Yeah.
If he comes over and sits next to you, that would be compliance.
He might intentionally start doing things that he knows he's generally not supposed to do.
He might, if he's really upset, he might throw a toy across the room, not at somebody, but away.
Yeah.
All of those things we could agree are non-compliance, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. You got a 5-second rule now that we're going to give 5 seconds to determine whether it's comply or non-comply. That's your next job after you've told him to do something.
Yeah.
Which hopefully was developmentally appropriate, one step, positively stated, direct explanation, all that good stuff. You got 5 seconds to determine comply, non-comply. Some kids who are younger, some kids who are on the spectrum, some kids with auditory processing problems, parents might decide my particular child needs more than 5, so they do a slow count 5 rather than a standard. That's up to you, but be consistent. when we praise for compliance, we say, thank you for listening. Thanks for following directions. I love when you do what I ask. You could also say, thanks for sitting next to me. But the advantage to the higher order praise is it will generalize more to following directions, but both count.
You should praise following directions as opposed to praise the activity. Okay.
It's considered a higher order praise, but both count as valid. Sometimes it's
the activity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the focusing on your response to it is interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily gone there.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I love it when you do what I ask.
You know, that gets into the philosophical things about how to praise.
Right.
You should find your comfort zone in praises that don't go there. If that kind of praise is an anathema to you, or philosophically you just don't like it, you could praise thanks for doing what I told you to do, or great job following directions, and stay away from things like I like it when you please me as your authority figure arbitrarily. Right. You know, you could stay away from that.
Right, because philosophically, like, to be honest with you, I don't want my child to always want to follow other people's rules. Does that make sense? Right.
It does. And that's on the one hand. And on the other hand, there are times he needs to follow directions, right?
Exactly.
Right. And you get to be the ones who tell him whose rules he has to follow. And typically what happens is parents deputize teachers. But parents also do their due diligence to set up safety behaviors that kids know they don't have to follow every adult, especially adults they don't know.
Right.
Right. But that's the subtleties of
Right.
of you know, teaching safety and all that. Because if an adult says, come in my car with me, you want them to have the social skills to, you know, assertively run away and yell and do whatever you end up teaching them to do.
Seriously.
Sometimes it's unclear whether kids are complying or not, but you have to make that decision consistently within the 5 seconds. So dawdling is whining, complaining, asking about the command, and that's considered a form of non-compliance.
Yeah, he doesn't tend to do that. He decides pretty
Yeah, he tends to decide like right away, I'm not doing it or I'm doing it. Okay. We do use the 5 seconds that I talked about, counting in our heads, not out loud. There are some parent training protocols like 1, 2, 3 magic that have parents counting down from 3 to 1. We don't do that in this. We count in our heads to 5.
Okay.
When kids do a variation, it's up to you to determine if they were well intended or not. Sometimes a kid handing a white block is just being inattentive to the fact that you said a red block, or if you pointed, they might have misunderstood which one you're pointing to. So we want you to be comfortable that he actually understood what you told him to do.
Okay.
But if it was developmentally appropriate and you pointed, and there should be no confusion,
That's
it's non-compliant.
okay.
Ignoring you, we already talked about, is a variation of non-compliance. So we certainly want to be sure that he heard you. This is a common one when parents say, please hand me the red block, and the kid tosses it or shoves it. We'd rather they get in the habit of following the exact thing they were told to do, but your consistency is what's most important. And again, you can use all the visual cues you need to, but what we encourage you to do is, once you've told him verbally what to do, withhold all verbalizations in the next 5 seconds, unless he complied and you're giving a praise. But we encourage all kinds of nonverbal prompts. And if you think about it, once you've told him what to do, if you keep talking, it's actually can be kind of confusing and take him off task. So once you've told him what to do, it should be very clear what he's supposed to do. Otherwise, it was not a good command to begin with. Complying with negative attitude. I think you could expect this one. Based on what you just said, he's doing his firefighter thing. He loves that. And you're changing it to something that's, in his mind, a less desirable activity. He may come over, but he may come over complaining or whining or crying. We want you to focus on the behavior, not the attitude, and not the verbalization, just the compliance behavior. Did he come over? at his age and knowing him, he's unlikely to respond as you see on the slide, but he may comply not so happily.
Mm.
We encourage you to treat that as compliance nonetheless. If you need to follow up with another command to shape, in this case being gentle, you could always do that. If he comes over and then leaves, we want you to know what to do. Treat it as a comply, but you could say, please stay here next to me. And that would be another follow-up that's more specific. All right, what if he doesn't comply? So in this protocol, we do use a timeout chair. I need to figure out with you, based on the fact that I won't be coaching you regularly, whether you want to attempt this. We could talk about, I'll talk you through how we do it, and then you can decide if you want this as part of your routine. But this is what we would have been working towards.
We do timeout.
So you would do a timeout in the chair for not bringing the block over, like not listening to that command?
Yes, because you're teaching them how to comply to simple commands before you get on to real life things.
Oh, interesting. I've only done a timeout like one time maybe. Ben uses it more regularly. So this is an issue of like not being 100% on the same wavelength.
But I understand sort of using this to build a skill of compliance. It's typically used by me more if there's been more than one attempt to stop unwanted behavior that has failed. Like,
and if you feel like he's getting out of control.
And he does well with timeouts. You know, I think sometimes he himself will give himself a timeout. Like when he gets upset, he'll separate himself from the other people and go sit quietly upstairs for 5 or 10 minutes.
It's not formalized. So the other thing to know is our protocol is not formalized in any way.
Yeah.
So he'll just have to go into like the dining room and be there for a few minutes, and Ben puts like the timer on the microwave, and then he stays there, and then he can come back, kind of thing. And he'll kind of play about by himself in there. So it's not formalized in the sense that there's a script to it. There's no script to it, and there's not like sitting in a chair. It's just he kind of goes into a separate room by himself where he doesn't get any reinforcement, any attention, and then comes back.
Yeah, we generally use it more as he's getting too wound up, he's too stimulated, and he just needs a little bit of time to wind down, as opposed to a purely punitive, what you did there was unacceptable.
I don't know if this works.
So let me point out what I'm hearing you say. Number one, inconsistency within person.
Definitely.
Number two, greater inconsistency between parents.
Yeah.
And number three, kind of conflating this kind of timeout, which is for non-compliance, with some chill down time because you're getting too revved up.
Yeah. And this is where, so in the parent coaching that I did before, the timeout did come up. She and I had talked about, do we really need it? And I sort of felt like maybe we do. And at that point I felt like we did. And then I sort of I felt like I managed to work around not needing it. And I think more philosophical issues with a timeout than Ben does.
I mean, I'd probably give him a timeout 2 or 3 times a month. Like,
it was more frequent for a while.
It was more frequent for a while, but I mean, recently.
But yeah, but I think everything that you said is true. There was a lot of inconsistency, like in general.
So I would say to you a couple of things. One is, if you said to me, philosophically, we object to this kind of timeout, then I'd be working with you to at least increase the consistency both within and between parents. I think that's really important, because otherwise you're confusing him, because the same behavior is not going to get the same consequence, and that's just confusing.
Right.
The reason people speed on the highway is because they're only intermittently punished for speeding. There's nothing consistent about it. But you and I know that if every time the gas pedal exceeded the speed limit, you got money deducted from your bank account, like no questions asked, you would quickly learn to drive consistently under the speed limit.
Look in the bag. You can use a flashlight to look in the bag.
So I think as a gift to Sky, whether it includes timeout or not is less relevant to me. I'll advocate, you're asking my opinion, and I will advocate that I think you should use it with him in this context. But even if you didn't, I think you owe it to him to have a more consistent plan within and between
That makes sense.
for his sake, so he could learn more what's exactly expected, so it's not confusing. At this point, on November 5th, 2020, your behavior ratings both show some improvement from baseline, but still, in your case, Erica, up in the pre-treatment range. And Ben, in your case, in between what we consider the sort of entry to treatment level and a graduation level. So I think he would benefit from this as part of your discipline protocol. When I have to, as devil's advocate, help you think through what you're actually going to do, I'd have to ask you, if you tell him to do stuff and you don't have a consistent consequence, what is it you intend to do when he non-complies?
Mm.
What I'm suggesting as an approach is you give him practice at complying, that you reinforce the heck out of it for doing the compliance, and that you have a technique that removes positive attention temporarily, and always come, like a timeout sequence for us, always ends with the child complying, getting praise, and then getting a follow-up instruction, so that you and he as a dyad can experience what it's supposed to be like when we tell you to do something. And remember, I'm the guy who's saying use these commands sparingly. So I don't want him being exposed to 50 commands a day where he's potentially going to be in timeout.
Right.
So
I
again,
think what's happening is we end up taking something away, you know, like you're not going to watch something later, or you're not going to get the gummy bear that you were going to get this afternoon, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
so the question is, do you want to stay with that, or would you rather do something that not only is going to be more effective, but guarantees that he's going to end up getting positive attention sooner than the method you're using?
I'd have to think about it personally.
Yeah, I mean, because you're with him much more during the day,
Yeah.
you typically handle more of the times of the day where there's a lot more command oriented,
Right.
or
But I
there is
don't.
need for command.
I guess I have not in a long time. Like I mean, obviously, kids' behavior changes over time, but it's been many months since I've even felt the need to use a timeout personally. But I know that there was a time, you know, 6 months ago or so. So.
But I mean, certainly since we've sort of moved away from as much school over the last couple of days for him, his behavior's really gotten much better. So we're hopeful that, you know, that would continue. But
So I don't think we have a consensus at this point.
Yeah, I think
Sorry.
you and I need to sit down and talk about this for a while and figure out like what the.
Because I did at some point get a script from the woman I was working with.
Oh yeah, the timeout protocol.
Yeah, with an entire protocol for the timeout, but we never enacted it because we didn't feel at the time that it was going to be necessary. And then there was just sort of an ad hoc timeout put in place by Ben.
And so I would minimally, I'd argue against the ad hoc part of it. And as I said before, you're using two kinds of timeouts. One may be intended as a punishment for non-complying, like when you take away something, or this other cool your jets down, you're getting revved up kind of thing, which I wouldn't call a timeout, or at least doesn't function the way we talk about a timeout.
No.
So if you were wanting the compliance training part of this, and you're telling him to do something, the question is what you would do in the face of non-compliance.
Well, so, you know, as an example, like if we're playing together and let's say he wasn't listening or something like you were saying, then I would say, well, I'm gonna have to stop playing with you now because, you know, you're not playing with me nicely or something like that. And that would be the removal of attention.
So from a behavioral perspective, it would also be escape from him learning the thing you wanted him to learn.
Mm-hmm. As opposed to a timeout and then he comes back and continues to play, and he keeps like, and then he
A
into,
timeout that by definition he comes back, complies, and then continues to play. Exactly.
but I guess
How much time are these timeouts? Are they a minute or two?
it's
The
typically
timeout is 3 minutes plus 5 seconds of quiet. And then we approach the chair and we say, you're sitting quietly. Are you ready to? And then fill in the blank with the behavior that he was told to do that got him into timeout. And then return to positive CDI interaction before giving any other commands. And I want to differentiate 2 ways that we do this. One is in the context of training, and the other is in the context of real life. But in both cases, it's 3 minutes and 5 seconds of quiet in the chair. The reason for the 5 seconds of quiet is that we don't want the child to think arbitrarily if they're screaming at 3 minutes. We don't want them to inadvertently think that you let them out of the chair because you couldn't take it anymore. Because that would be reinforcing the behavior.
So you do the 3 minutes and then you say we need 5 seconds of quiet, and then
You note the 3 minutes, you then wait to count to 5, and then approach the chair saying, you're sitting quietly, you're ready to sit next to me. Are you ready to hand me the blue block? Are you ready to put the toys back in the bin? They then do that, and we simply say the word okay, as opposed to praise, because we've gone through too much to get that compliance, but then immediately follow it with another instruction so that you and he and the dyad get to experience what it's like when it's being done the right way. So it minimizes the time for the child to comply, maximizes the likelihood that they're getting a praise at the end for doing the right thing twice.
you know, I think this is one that probably Eric and I need to kind of read through and think about a little bit in terms of comfort level with incorporating, because it does run a little contrary to particularly how she does most of her parenting. Yeah, I think this is probably one that you and I need to talk about a little bit offline, because it's just it's very different than how you in particular handled.
Yeah.
So let me leave you with
I'm doing it,
Yeah.
but or working, but it's just
so let me leave you with some information for you then to talk about before going forward, because everything
Okay.
I'm going forward is predicated on this.
Oh, I see. So this is an essential part, because I was going to ask you what alternatives do you have to the timeout?
There are a couple of alternatives. One is a broken record approach, where you repeat the command 3 times and then abandon it, but also
Mhm.
take away attention, which
Mhm.
inadvertently, unfortunately, reinforces the non-compliance, but at least it gives you a way out to not get into a power struggle.
Mhm.
The other thing that some people do is, I don't think appropriate for kids at his age, which are delayed sticker charts for points for compliance across the day.
Yeah, we've tried that. That's not
Developmentally.
We tried.
Yeah.
Well, we tried it where he got, I forget what it was. It
It
was
was a chalkboard.
some stars or something, and that added up in the morning and then also added up in the afternoon. But the gratification was so delayed that I think it didn't work for him. It was-
Yeah,
it was
and
too
that's
far
what
in
I
advance.
would predict. Even if you didn't tell me that for his age, that's
Okay.
what I would predict anyway. I don't want to talk you into doing this, but I do want you to know what I think about it, and then leave it for you guys to discuss. It's effective, it's positively oriented. I've never had a family say, what the hell were you thinking? Who experienced it as negative.
Mhm.
It's very common for people at this point to say, I don't know if I want to do this. So there's nothing, not that you need any knowledge about what other families do to make your own informed decision, but I just wanted to kind of give it context and normalize it in that way.
Whoa.
And I'm trying to think what other information I can give you to help you guys make an informed decision.
So the only alternative is the broken record you were saying?
Because you're trying to improve compliance. Yeah. So there's, some variation of compliance training.
Mhm. Okay.
I mean, if you said to me, what's a watered down, there's no other versions that will give you the same effect. If you said, what's a watered down version that even if it gives a lesser effect, you can educate us about, I would say, just make sure you reinforce the hell out of compliance and suck away the attention you give after non-compliance. The foundation you've laid is to increase the potency of your attention.
Right.
I can remember coaching sessions with you and where you might just pat the floor and wave him over instead of saying, come over here, because I was working with you to avoid unnecessary commands. And he'd come over and then you'd pour on the attention. So in any version of this, the differential attention for complying and non-complying is key. I don't view this, timeout technically is not a punishment technique. It's the removal of positive attention, not the addition of an aversive consequence. That philosophically, that's where I'm at with that. I know other people might feel differently about it.
But I guess, I don't know, right? I mean, in the scenario where I say, I can't play with you right now because you're not, whatever it is, whatever the command was. And then I go away. It's like the equivalent of a timeout. Like I go away for a minute or two and then I re-enter and try, right? I mean, I guess, how is that different necessarily? Like giving him another opportunity, but removing the attention for some period of time. Let's call it 3 minutes and 5 seconds or something, and then coming
Yes,
back.
I don't know how often you do that and actually come back and try and do it until he complies with the thing you told him to do. That's not something I have, I don't know how often you do that. Most people who do what you were describing just kind of give up on the situation, leaving the kid from a learning point of view, having been told to do something, being unsuccessful, and then just having the loss of attention.
Mhm.
What I like about this as a process, it's a temporary loss of attention with the opportunity to be successful.
Okay, and it's a built-in return to attention.
It is so built in return to positive attention. I mean, that is, if I ever saw somebody I trained to train parents to do this, who didn't present it at that, I would fail them right away. It's built-in return to positive attention.
I think what probably makes sense for you and I to do, because we are sort of over the course of this week really revamping a lot of how he spends his day
That's what I was
to try to bring a little
and
more
how we spend
and to how we spend our day, is to let that play out over the next week or so. And then when things get back to a more consistent daily routine, really drill down how much non-compliance is an issue.
Mhm.
And then we can determine whether or not we have to think about a timeout as a way to foster more compliance.
Mhm.
Because I know at least he generally listens to you.
Mhm.
There aren't really that many times where you say something and
Right. And I mean, I guess that's a good point, actually, right? So there's a differential in the parental interaction of the child, right? And so that's
probably why I use a timeout more often than you.
Right, that's probably true.
You guys have a different level of.
It sounds like you could use this time to do your due diligence and really collect some data about compliance, non-compliance when you care about it.
Mhm.
I would encourage you minimally to keep up with your daily CDI practice.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to use me as a resource via email for quick, easy things that come up, since you ordinarily would be waiting until you saw me in a week. It's not a burden on me usually to answer quick and easy questions.
Thanks.
And then let's at least check in to see where you want to go with this. I'm at your disposal. I'm glad we kind of approached it this way, let you get some information.
It's a really useful hour for me.
Good.
No, and for me as well. And there's a lot to think about. And oh, my computer's about to
no, please don't do that. Please don't do that.
Yeah, so we will thank you for recording this also. We'll definitely go over this and think about it, and we'll certainly be in touch.
Yeah.
And when you said please don't do that, what did you mean instead?
She was about to turn off my computer.
Dude. What
could you have said?
Please don't turn off my computer.
He doesn't get it. Ben, What could you say instead of please don't do that?
Come sit on my lap. I would love
There
to.
you go.
Ben said something funny. He said something like, forevermore. I think I'm going to hear his voice in my head when I give a labeled praise or something like that. So-
Yes, I've heard that. Believe me, I've heard that. Now, go ahead with the labeled praise for sitting in your lap.
Yeah, you did an excellent job of sitting in my lap, and I appreciate that you did not turn off my computer.
Beautiful labeled praise.
Yeah.
Okay. To be continued.
Like what? All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your
You're welcome.
time and your flexibility.
You got
And
it.
your expertise.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.